Look, I know how this sounds. I really do. You're already judging me, aren't you? That's okay. That's what everyone does. But I need you to understand. I need you to hear my side, just for a moment, before you cast your stones. Because it's never as simple as it looks from the outside, is it? It never is. You see the headline, I cheated twice before we had kids. Now he's divorcing me 16 years later, and I have nothing left, and you probably think, serves her right, the cheater, and maybe, in some twisted cosmic way, it does. But the story isn't just about the cheating. It's about why. It's about how someone ends up in a place where they feel so utterly lost, so completely suffocated, that they do something that feels, at the time, like the only way to breathe. My name is Sarah, and I'm 42 years old. I've lost everything. My husband, Michael, filed for divorce last month, exactly 16 years after we walked down the aisle, 17 years after our first child was born, and almost 2 decades after the mistakes that set all of this in motion. He left me with the house, sure, but it's a husk now, filled with echoes of a family that's fractured beyond repair. Our 2 children, teenage girls, they don't even look at me the same way. Their eyes are just cold. And the friends? Forget it. The life I built, the stability I craved, the very foundation of my existence, it's all gone. Just a pile of ash where a roaring fire used to be. And it all started with a whisper of dissatisfaction, a quiet yearning for something more, something I couldn't even name back then, something Michael couldn't give me, because he didn't even know it was missing. We met in college, Michael and I, 20 years old, full of dreams, or at least I thought I was. He was everything everyone said you should want. Kind. Attentive. Stable. Michael was the kind of man your parents dream of you bringing home. He remembered birthdays, anniversaries, even the day we first held hands. He'd leave little notes for me, just silly doodles and a single word like smile, or you. He was steadfast like an old oak tree, and I thought for a long time that's exactly what I needed. Everyone adored him. My family, my friends, even the grumpy old barista at our local coffee shop would give him a wider smile than me. He was the golden boy. He always had a plan, always had a steady job, always had a quiet, reassuring presence. And me? I was the one who was supposed to be lucky, the one who had found her rock, her anchor. We built the life, brick by predictable brick. He bought us a charming little starter home, meticulously maintained, perfectly symmetrical. He meticulously planned our finances, our weekends, our vacations. Every Friday night was pizza and a movie. Every Saturday morning was a trip to the farmer's market, followed by a quiet afternoon reading on the porch. Every summer, it was the same beach house, the same worn-out board games, the same conversations. It was safe. It was comfortable. It was the gilded cage. He loved me so much, in his quiet, dependable way. He adored me. And that adoration, that constant, unwavering gaze, it began to feel less like love and more like surveillance. His unwavering kindness, which once felt like a warm blanket, started to feel like a suffocating shroud. His stability, once a comfort, became a concrete wall, trapping me inside a life that felt utterly devoid of spontaneity, of passion, of anything truly new. I started to resent the predictability, the utter lack of wildness in our lives. He was so good, so fundamentally decent, that it felt like a betrayal to even harbor these thoughts. How could I complain? I had the perfect partner, the perfect life, on paper. But inside I was screaming. I wanted chaos. I wanted to feel something sharp, something real, something that hadn't been meticulously planned and laid out for me like a perfectly folded shirt. I wanted to feel alive, not just present. It sounds awful, doesn't it? To call love suffocating. But imagine being held so tightly, even with the softest hands, that you can't draw a full breath. That was Michael's love. It was soft, yes, but it was also unrelenting, and there was no space for me to expand, to truly be myself, because I didn't even know who that was anymore. I was just Michael's partner. Michael's everything. Then came Daniel. He was everything Michael wasn't. He was a whirlwind, a chaotic, dazzling storm. I met him at a professional conference of all places. He was a freelance photographer, all dark humor and piercing blue eyes, perpetually disheveled, but in that impossibly attractive way. He laughed too loud, made inappropriate jokes, and looked at me like I was a puzzle he desperately wanted to solve. While Michael would ask about my day and patiently listen, Daniel would interrupt my sentences, challenging my assumptions, making me question everything I thought I knew. He saw the flicker of something restless in me, something I'd buried so deep I'd almost forgotten it was there. And he wasn't afraid of it. He encouraged it. The first transgression was so small, so innocent-seeming at the time. An extended conversation at the hotel bar, laughing louder than I had in years. Then, a follow-up email, ostensibly about work, that quickly spiraled into late-night exchanges, filled with shared secrets and forbidden thoughts. Daniel made me feel witty, intriguing, dangerous. He told me I was wasted, that I had a fire in me that was being slowly extinguished. And I, desperate for a spark, soaked it all in. I started lying, first about where I was, then about who I was talking to, then about what I was feeling. Small lies, easy lies, just little white fictions to protect Michael, I told myself. To protect him from the ugly truth of my own dissatisfaction. Because how could I tell him that his perfect love felt like a cage? The thrill of it was intoxicating. The clandestine texts, the quick, stolen glances, the hushed phone calls in the dead of night. It was like I was living a double life, one that was muted and gray, and another that was vibrant and pulsing with forbidden energy. Michael was so trusting. So utterly, heartbreakingly trusting. He never checked my phone, never questioned my late nights at work events, never batted an eye when I'd come home buzzing with a nervous energy I tried to pass off as fatigue. He just smiled, kissed my forehead, and said, "I love you, honey. Get some rest." And that trust, that beautiful, blind trust, felt like a green light. It made me feel powerful. It made me feel like I was getting away with something truly monumental, something that proved I was more than just Michael's quiet, dependable partner. I was this other person, this wild, unpredictable creature, and no one knew. No one but Daniel. The first time it was a blurred line, an accidental touch that lingered, a late-night drink that turned into a shared cab, then a shared hotel room at a conference I swore was mandatory and out of town. It felt less like a choice and more like an inevitability, a release of pressure that had been building for years. I told myself it wasn't real cheating, not really. It was just an experience, a momentary lapse in judgment. It was Daniel, saying exactly what I needed to hear, seeing the unfulfilled woman I was becoming. He promised me a freedom Michael couldn't comprehend. He told me I deserved more than a life lived by a schedule, that my spirit was too big for such a small existence. I drank it up, every last drop. And for a brief, exhilarating moment I felt like myself again, or at least the self I thought I was supposed to be. The one who wasn't afraid to break a few rules. Then, weeks later, Michael surprised me with a weekend getaway, just the two of us, to rekindle the spark, he said. He was trying, bless his heart. He really was. And for a moment, I almost believed I could go back. But the taste of something new, something dangerous, had already tainted my palate. The guilt was a dull ache, but the memory of that thrill, that exhilarating feeling of being seen by someone new, it was far more potent. So I buried it. I pushed it down, deep, deep down, and convinced myself it was a one-time thing. A phase. A moment of weakness. Everyone has those, right? That has to count for something, right? Except it wasn't a one-time thing. A few months later, the restlessness returned, stronger than ever. Daniel was gone, a fleeting fantasy that evaporated as quickly as he arrived, leaving a trail of empty promises and a casual goodbye that stung more than I cared to admit. He'd found another muse, another wasted talent, to temporarily ignite. That should have been my wake-up call. The stark reality that this thrilling chaos was just that, chaos, not a sustainable life. But instead, it just left a void, a desperate craving for that same high, that same feeling of being desired for something other than my ability to keep a tidy home or make a decent pot roast. This time it was a colleague, Mark. He was different from Daniel. More grounded, less flashy, but with a quiet intensity that was just as captivating. He listened to my frustrations about Michael's predictability, about the mundane routine, and he didn't judge. He just nodded, his eyes sympathetic, and offered quiet understanding. He'd tell me I was brave for even admitting these things, that it took courage to want more. He made me feel like I wasn't selfish, but simply misunderstood. That I was a woman on a journey of self-discovery, and that Michael, sweet, predictable Michael, was merely an obstacle on that path. So I convinced myself again. This wasn't about sex. This was about connection. This was about me. About finally figuring out who I was meant to be, outside of the confines of Michael's steady, suffocating gaze. The escalation was swift. Late-night work sessions at the office, long lunches that stretched into early evenings, girls' nights that were anything but. Michael, bless his heart, never suspected a thing. He'd send me texts, "Thinking of you, love," or "Can't wait for you to get home," and I'd reply with a saccharine sweetness that made my stomach churn, all while my heart pounded with a mix of fear and exhilarating power. I was juggling two lives, two personas, two vastly different versions of myself. And the more I got away with it, the more I believed I was some kind of master manipulator, a woman capable of navigating complex emotional landscapes without a scratch. I started to believe that the stable, loving relationship I had with Michael was the real lie, the facade, and that these passionate, secret connections were where my true self resided. I deserved this, didn't I? I deserved to feel alive. I remember one night with Mark. It was supposed to be just dinner, but it morphed into hours of talking, confessing, dreaming of a life free from the suffocating expectations I felt under with Michael. I convinced myself, truly, that this was it. This was my escape. Mark understood me in a way Michael never could. He saw the real me, the wild me. I believed he was my destiny, the person who would finally unleash me from my gilded cage. I was ready to leave Michael. I had crafted the perfect narrative in my head, a brave woman choosing herself, choosing passion over comfort. It was going to be messy, yes, but it would be worth it. It would be my liberation. I was so ready to pull the trigger. I had even started writing the words in my head, the carefully crafted, self-justifying monologue I would deliver to Michael. It would be gentle but firm. It would be about my needs, my growth, my desperate desire for something more. But just as I was about to dismantle Michael's world, my entire fantasy shattered into a million tiny pieces. Mark pulled back. He said he couldn't do it. He had a girlfriend, a long-term one he was sort of engaged to, back home, a girlfriend he'd forgotten to mention. This was just fun, he said. A distraction. A fantasy. He said he truly enjoyed our time together, but that he was fundamentally a man who desired stability. He had no interest in appending his carefully constructed life for a wild fling, no matter how deep our connection felt. Just like Daniel. Another mirage. He even had the gall to tell me that I was too much, that I needed to figure out what I actually wanted before I hurt anyone else. The audacity. I was left completely adrift. Daniel had been a chaotic spark, Mark a quiet, burning flame, but both had extinguished themselves, leaving me in darkness, staring back at the comfortable, mundane life I had so desperately tried to escape. I had nearly destroyed everything for a fleeting feeling, a self-indulgent fantasy that dissolved the moment it was challenged by reality. But here's the thing about me. I'm a survivor. Or, at least, that's what I told myself. I tucked the shame, the humiliation, the bitter disappointment of Mark's rejection into the same compartment where I kept Daniel's. I buried it. And then I walked back into Michael's arms, as if nothing had happened, as if I hadn't nearly detonated our entire world. I became Michael's perfect partner again, played the role, leaned into the comfort, convinced myself that I had learned my lesson. We got married, started a family, built a life that seemed, to the outside world, absolutely idyllic. And I truly believed I had gotten away with it. For 16 long, quiet years, I believed I had escaped the consequences of my selfishness. Until Michael dropped the bomb. It wasn't a fight, not a screaming match, not even a tearful confession from me. It was a Tuesday evening a few weeks ago. He came home from work, just like any other day. He set his briefcase down, loosened his tie. But his eyes were different. Cold, distant. He just looked at me, with a look I'd never seen before, a look that cut me to the bone. And he said, in a voice I barely recognized, a voice devoid of any emotion, "I know," just 2 words. I know. My heart plummeted. I felt the blood drain from my face. I knew immediately what he meant. But how? How could he know now? After all this time? He didn't yell. He didn't scream. He didn't even cry. He just laid it all out. He had known or suspected for years. Not from the beginning, but bits and pieces, whispers, coincidences. He'd found an old email draft I'd accidentally saved, years and years ago. A cryptic, flowery note to Daniel. Then, a few years after that, he'd overheard a snippet of conversation at a work function, a throwaway line about Mark, spoken by someone who didn't realize he was standing there. He connected the dots. He didn't confront me. He just waited. Patiently. Silently. Gathering every single piece of evidence. Text messages, old photos, even the metadata from forgotten social media posts that corroborated my lies about my whereabouts. He had become a detective in his own home, meticulously building a case against me, while I, oblivious, lived my perfectly curated life, believing I had buried my secrets forever. He had folders. Actual, physical folders filled with printouts, timelines, even maps. He knew where I was, who I was with, what I was doing, even on the nights I swore I was working late or visiting a sick aunt. He calmly presented it all, like a prosecuting attorney delivering an opening statement. There was no anger, no pain, just a profound, unsettling certainty. He told me he couldn't live with the deception anymore, not after all this time, not with our children growing up in a home built on such a fundamental lie. He said he had tried to move past it, to forgive me silently, to bury it for the sake of our family. But he couldn't. Not anymore. The thought of raising our daughters in a house where their mother was such a stranger, such a master of deceit, had finally broken him. And just like that, with quiet dignity, he ended it. There was no negotiation, no begging, no desperate pleas for me to explain myself. He was done. Completely. Absolutely. Within days, he had moved out. He took what he needed, neatly, efficiently. He left me the house, the car, the bulk of our joint savings, everything that, on paper, looked like a victory for me. But it felt like a curse. He just wanted a clean break. He blocked my number. Our communication shifted exclusively to email, handled by lawyers. Our daughters, confused and heartbroken, still lived with me, but their father had made it clear to them that this was my doing. He didn't go into graphic details, but he didn't need to. They saw the coldness in his eyes, the devastation in his quiet demeanor. They saw that I was the one left behind, and he was the one walking away, head held high. And the worst part? Daniel and Mark? They were long gone, ghosts from a distant past, leaving me completely alone to face the wreckage I had created. There was no secret comfort to turn to now. No thrilling escape. Just the hollow echo of my own choices. The social isolation hit almost immediately. Michael's family, who had always been so warm, so welcoming, became a wall of ice. His mother, who used to call me her other daughter, wouldn't even answer my calls. I tried reaching out, trying to explain, to apologize, to beg for understanding. But her silence was deafening. Michael's sister, my closest confidant for years, sent me a single text. "You broke his heart. You deserve what you get." My own friends, the ones who had listened to my vague complaints about Michael's boringness years ago, suddenly saw me with new eyes. Their pity quickly morphed into judgment. The whispers followed me everywhere. The invitation stopped. Suddenly, I was the pariah, the woman who had ruined a good man's life. And Michael? Oh, Michael. He flourished. It's sickening, truly. He looks a lighter, happier. The quiet kindness that I once found so stifling now shone, unburdened. He started painting again, a hobby he'd abandoned years ago.
He started working out. He traveled.
I saw pictures on social media, pictures his friends would innocently post, not realizing I'd still see them, of him smiling, genuinely smiling, with new people, new friends, living a vibrant, active life I had always secretly yearned for. He looks 10 years younger, while I feel like I've aged 20. He started dating someone new, a cheerful, effortlessly elegant woman who seems to adore him as much as he adores her. They look happy, truly, incandescently happy. It's a cruel, bitter twist of fate. Meanwhile, my life just stagnated. The house, which I had once seen as my sanctuary, became my prison. The quiet solitude I thought I craved became an unbearable loneliness. I tried to reconnect with Daniel and Mark, pathetically, desperately, through old contacts, just for a moment of validation. They both ignored me, of course. Mark even changed his email. The emptiness I felt inside before, that vague sense of dissatisfaction, was now a gaping, raw wound. I lost weight. I stopped caring about how I looked. I spent my days picking at the scab of my regret, wondering where it all went wrong, even though the answer was glaringly obvious. The worst was a few weeks ago. Michael's mother, Martha, called me, not to offer comfort, but to deliver a final, devastating truth bomb. She told me how Michael had shielded me for years, how he'd made excuses for my restlessness, how he'd tried to be enough, even when he knew he wasn't. She told me he had seen my unhappiness, had tried to address it, had tried to make me happy in his own way, but I was too selfish to notice. She said, "Sarah, you always wanted a fire, but you never realized he was a steady, warm flame, capable of burning for a lifetime. And you chose to burn everything down, just for the momentary spark of a match." She hung up before I could even formulate a response. She was right, of course. That was the most painful part. Then last week I saw it. A picture on Michael's sister's social media. Michael, holding a new baby, a tiny, swaddled bundle, with the new woman smiling beside him, a look of utter contentment on her face. Their baby. It wasn't just a new relationship, a new life. It was a whole new family, a fresh start, untainted by my selfishness, by my past. He hadn't just moved on. He had built something beautiful and new from the ashes of our ruined life. And I was outside, looking in, forever separate from the warmth of that new light. And yet, there's still a part of me that whispers, even now, that I don't regret wanting more. That I don't regret wanting to feel alive. Michael was good, yes, too good perhaps. He couldn't handle my edges, my desire for something unpredictable. He was a cage, however golden. It wasn't my fault that he was so unchanging. I needed to choose myself, didn't I? I needed to explore. That has to count for something. That has to be a valid reason, right? I learned so much about myself, about what I don't want, about how I react under pressure. But the truth is, I'm alone. I'm utterly and completely alone. The house is too big, too empty. My children look at me with eyes that mirror his disappointment. And every night, I lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if that fleeting moment of self-indulgent excitement, that desperate grasp for something sharp and new, was worth this unending, crushing loneliness. I'm still searching for that thrill, that sense of being fully alive. But all I find now is the quiet, bitter echo of what I destroyed. And I have nothing left. Nothing.